As the Bible is arguably the most read book in human history, and many have read the book of Genesis. But the truth is that nearly just as many have no idea of how to understand Genesis. Our goal for our series in Genesis is to help you have a better understanding of how the first book of the Bible charts the course of the rest of the Bible. We're going to see why Genesis is such an important book for students to have a deeper knowledge of, understanding the big picture of Genesis, and take a cursory look at Genesis 1 today. So let's dive in. How are you doing? I'm Dominic, and Lighthouse is a youth ministry at Austin Chinese Church where we desire for every student to personally experience the light of Christ and for students to shine the light of Christ into your spheres of influence. We're kicking off a new series in the book of Genesis that'll run through the end of May. Maybe you've tried opening the Bible for the very first time and just started reading at the beginning. Or maybe you're super interested in all the fascinating nuances of the book of Genesis. I hope and pray there's something here in our series for everyone. I'm going to be upfront and concede we simply cannot cover everything there is in the book of Genesis. For example, I'm not going to cover evolution versus creation. We're going to try to hit the highlights though. And now, many of you may say, hey, I remember the story of Noah and Abraham and Joseph and so on from Promised Land. Why should we spend time learning about it in Lighthouse? I think Genesis is so important for Lighthouse to focus on because Genesis truly does chart the course of the rest of the Bible. Genesis means origin, and it tells how the story of how things began, how they originated. While many people immediately think of Genesis 1 and 2, Genesis also explains how humanity came to be, how God begins his relationship with humanity, and the origin story of God's specific relationship with a particular family and people, how sin was introduced into our world, and God's plan to rescue, to redeem, to restore humanity back to himself. Genesis also introduces the origin of three major world religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. The truth is, there's a lot of debate over who wrote Genesis and the first 5 books of the Bible called the Pentateuch. Let's begin with who the author of Genesis and the first 5 books of the Bible is. We believe it was primarily written by Moses, and the account of his death was probably written by someone else. There's a lot of dispute whether Moses actually was the author, but I believe there's enough evidence to show that Moses is likely the author. I'm not going to get into the arguments why Moses was or was not the author of Genesis, as I think it would really take away from our focus. I just want to let you know that there is a debate about it, but I personally hold to the traditional interpretation that the author of Genesis is in fact Moses. The other detail I think is worth mentioning is wondering how much scientific credence we ought to demand from the book of Genesis. Genesis was written for a people who don't have our scientific understanding. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect the book of Genesis to be able to explain itself from a 21st century perspective. Regardless of your faith position, what you need to understand is that Genesis was written as the inspired word of God. Now, if you're not a Christian and you do not believe Genesis and the rest of the Bible is the inspired word of God, I respect that, and I'm thankful that you're taking the time to watch this today. We believe all truth is God's truth. So while we do not believe a book written around 1400 BC can fully satisfy our modern scientific understanding, we need to recall that Genesis is not a scientific text. And what it does provide is actually consistent with God's broader truth. Shortly after I became a Christian, after my sophomore year in high school, I read this particular book cover to cover, and it's actually a really easy read, to be honest with you. It's called Know Why You Believe, and it was so helpful to me to answer questions about the faith that I didn't quite understand. And in order to better understand Genesis, it addresses topics like, are the Bible documents real? Does archaeology verify scripture? Does science and scripture agree? Why does God allow suffering and evil? Does Christianity differ from other world religions? So, the first 3 people who comment, I want to know why I believe, down here in the comments below will win a copy of the book that I'll send to you. Of course, we may have questions that arise like, what kind of days does Genesis 1 describe? How long ago is this all supposed to have happened? Were all species created as they are now? Were Adam and Eve actually real people? How much of the earth did Noah's flood actually cover? And how much impact did Noah's flood have on geological formations and so on? Look, Genesis is a book about the origins of all the things that came to be, and thus it is not reasonable to read it as a scientific text. It's quite amazing that the accuracy of Genesis, remember, we're talking about 1400 BC, does not contradict science, and it corresponds well with archaeological and historical records from the ancient Near East. Genesis is a book of historical narratives or stories where we focus on a particular hero, an individual character that we learn about from the tales of these genealogies of royal lineage. If you get to the genealogy and you go, skip, right? You're really missing out because you're really missing the fact that Moses is telling you that this is a chapter heading in the book that will focus on a certain individual and his family. While the names and the lengths of their lives may not interest you much, what you need to really know is that God is trying to highlight a distinctive family. And in spite of that family's sin, God, in His grace, actively works to help continue their family line. Now, just think about it from a Chinese American perspective. Why is our traditional Chinese culture so obsessed with having boys? Because each family wants their family lineage to continue. And God, with each family, is working to actually establish a royal lineage of future kings. Consider David, the kings of Israel and Judah, and eventually leading to Jesus. And this lineage isn't royal because of their bloodline, but because God divinely promises a land, a nation, and a blessing onto the world. Here we see the historical narrative unfolds through the genealogies that serve as the chapter headings. We have these family histories as we focus in on certain individuals and these heroes who are less heroic in actuality, and we focus in on their families. They're not heroes at all, as they're all sinful. Yet, they are a beautiful canvas for God to display His mercy, His grace, His special relationship with the Israelite people, and His redemptive plan to the world that finds its final fulfillment in Jesus Christ. We see that the scope, the focus of Genesis, that acts like a zoom lens where we begin to start on the book, begins with the origins of the world, then moves to the nations, and ultimately focusing in on what would become the nation of Israel. The book of Genesis is so rich and interesting with numerous interpretations, just like we studied when we looked at the book of Revelation. While we could have gotten all caught up in the minutiae and the details, I wanted us to actually zoom out and take a much larger point of view and see the broader theme from Revelation. With Revelation, I wanted to drive home that Revelation, regardless of differing interpretations, is all about God's victory over sin and death to reconcile and restore His creation, and most specifically, restore humanity back to Himself. So my goal for us is to stay zoomed out on the bigger picture on the book of Genesis and try to move to follow the primary movements that relate to the Christian's life, regardless of your detailed interpretation. The story begins with humanity created in order to have a unique, a special relationship with God and to exercise authority on behalf of God over the created world. But Adam and Eve's disobedience separates them from God. As a result, they are punished and cursed and kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Genesis 12 through Revelation are all about the hope that humanity will be reconciled back to God. You see, Genesis and really the first 5 books through Deuteronomy are focused on the idea of blessings and curses. Really, it's quite simple. Faithfulness and obedience to God brings blessing, and self-interest and disobedience to God brings a curse. The curse causes a breakdown in the relationship between humanity and God, and someone or something needs to pay the price in order to tear this barrier down. Through the land God promised to the eventual nation of Israel, and even the non-Israelite people that God brought into his salvation family, David's royal lineage of faithful people who are obedient to God's laws and morals provides a rightful line that's not based upon blood or ethnicity for a greater Adam, a greater Abraham, a greater Moses, a greater David for God to unveil his rescue plan to humanity. The Messiah, the Savior, would be the only one who could fulfill the mission of the rescue plan, who is ultimately found in the person and work of Jesus Christ. In essence, God begins to show that God's true family isn't one that's defined by blood or ethnicity or by doing all the right things. God's true family are those who are obedient to God and exercising faith in God. This is most crystallized in Romans 4:16 and 17, which says, "That is why it depends on faith, in order that the promise may rest on grace and be guaranteed to all his offspring, not only to the adherent of the law, but also to the one who shares the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all, as it is written, I have made you the father of many nations, in the presence of the God in whom he believed, who gives life to the dead and calls into existence the things that do not exist." It's not about where you're from or what family you're from, no matter how amazing or how poor your family name is. It's all about sharing the faith of Abraham, who trusted in God, who had faith in God, who committed his whole life, who staked his entire future on his faith in God. Now, with all that framework out of the way, let's jump into Genesis 1. At this point, go ahead and pause the video and read Genesis 1 as a small group, and we'll get into the passage. I think it goes without saying that Genesis 1 brings up countless questions and thus many interpretations. There are at least 9 major reasonable views that are held by respected evangelical scholars. So I want to preface everything that's shared today as a humbly held opinion that I do not consider to be a foundational interpretation, as I believe there's a greater theme that I believe holds. So of all the views, I think the one that seems to be the most reasonable to me, and it's to consider the 7 days of creation as non-literal. This doesn't mean to take the entire chapter non-literally. Did everything happen in Genesis 1? Yes. Did it happen in a literal 24-hour period? I think it's highly improbable. Not because God is not capable, but because our understanding of the age of the universe tells us that too. So, for example, when in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. What's fascinating here in verses 1 and 2 is that in the Hebrew, the word God is in plural, already referring to the Trinitarian, the 3 persons of God, that nature of God, while the act of creating is a verb in the singular, speaking to the one being that God is. And so God creates matter, space, and time before the first day from even nothing. I want to emphasize, I think the organization of Genesis 1 matches a Jewish and ancient Near East poetic practice of parallel structures that play off of each other. And common practice for poetic expression is the use of the number 7 to indicate perfection and completeness. In essence, the creation story poetically speaks to perfection and the completeness of God's creation that we see in Genesis 1:31 when God declares that everything created was very good. First, note that the first 3 days are not literal 24-hour days, because the sun, the greater light of verse 16, wasn't even created until day 4. We also notice that the 7th day isn't literal because there's no closure to the day and night, and continues into the present without a clear close to the day. Perhaps it's easiest to understand each day that we see as a period of time instead of a literal 24-hour period. Right? When we think about these periods of time and the use of the word day, it's like God is so big and powerful and sovereign that it's like God created everything. And if you've ever been in a state of flow where you've been super productive, getting everything done that you needed to in the morning, and oh boy, like by the afternoon, you just got a whole bunch of things done, and wow, time just flew by. And I guess I'm done now. It's like God just saying, yeah, I just did everything and time just flew by. But to me, it was just like a day. It was just a moment in time for him. So when we look at Genesis 2:19 and following, as we're zoomed in on humanity, it's clear that a literal 24-hour day also isn't possible to name every animal that God has ever created. And perhaps what is most helpful to understand about Genesis 1 is how it is organized in a logical manner, more than it is organized in a chronological manner. God creates the kingdoms, the locations, and then he fills these locations with their inhabitants, with their rulers. These inhabitants are not just mere inhabitants. They're the rulers of the kingdoms that God has put them in. So the sun is to rule the day and the moon is to rule the night. The fish are to swim in the waters and the birds are to fly in the sky. The humans are to live on the earth and rule it, as it says in verses 28 to 30. Everything is good because it is productive and it can be lived in. God's final creative act concludes dramatically with making humanity, both female and male, in his image and his likeness. And humanity is to rule over the entire creation on behalf of God. And underpinning all of this creative work is the singular God who is so powerful, who can not only do it all, but can also rest on the proverbial seventh day. We have to keep in mind that God's people live amongst other people that worshipped innumerable gods. There are gods for everything. And yet they are to worship one God only. The idea that there is only one God when everyone else says that there are so many gods must have caused God's people to dramatically stick out in comparison to their neighbors. Wow, that's a lot that we covered, and we barely started to scratch the surface here. I'm going to turn things over to your small group so you can begin to discuss Genesis 1. Here are the discussion questions I'd like for you to discuss with your small group. First, what impresses you most about Genesis 1 through chapter 2, verse 3? Second, is there a section of Genesis 1 that you really struggle to understand? Third, when you read Genesis 1, share what you imagine in your mind God is doing and what God is like as he is creating. Fourth, does the way Genesis 1 is proposed to be organized, does that make sense to you? Or is there another way you think makes more sense? And lastly, what impression are you left with when taking a closer look at Genesis 1? After you've taken a closer look at Genesis 1 through chapter 2, verse 3, how does this affect how you perceive the scope and sovereignty of God? Since the impact of the pandemic hit us last spring, we haven't had a baptism for a long time. Baptism is simply a public proclamation of a Christian's faith. We are currently planning on having a baptism on April 11th. Obviously, we will hold the baptism in a safe and socially distanced manner, and we'll hold 4 classes over Zoom to help prepare you and equip you for your baptism. If you're interested in getting baptized or you have questions about baptism, please email me and I'd love to help you out. We have a survey we would love for all of Lighthouse to fill out. You can find the survey by going to acc.church/lighthouse21survey. We want to know how you're doing, what you're up to, and how we can better serve you. Now, we've got prizes for you. Yup, you've heard me right, prizes. So it's in your best interest to fill out the survey. We've got an amazing prize pack for the grand prize winner. We've got snacks, drinks, instant noodles, candy, Muji pens, a Sanex face mask, a Korean face mask, a boba plushie, and more. This prize pack is gonna be stuffed full. Our second and third prize winners will also win gift cards. I hope you all complete the survey. Now, in the survey is an optional question for you to share your best idea for a future Lighthouse teaching series. The criteria for this winner will be based upon originality, relevance, and connecting to the distinct emphasis we place on Friday lessons, which is about showing you how faith and everyday life intersect with one another, and Sunday lessons, which is about teaching you the Bible and theology for the teaching series. And the winner for this question will win not just one squashmallow, but 2 squashmallows. I can't wait to see your ideas. My prayer is that today's lesson begins to start us off on the journey of seeing the initial movements of where all of the Bible and ultimately redemptive history is headed. We hope that Genesis helps inform and shape how you process the rest of the Bible. There will be many fascinating passages ahead, and we pray that you are committed to learning more about God, God's nature, God's plan for humanity, and our response of obedience and faith, or our response of self-interest and disobedience, because that's all we really have. I pray that you're holding a posture of curiosity and interest towards each other and to learn and grow from one another. And we'll see you in the next video.